Well, welcome to Sweet Tea and Coffee. My name is Blake Russell, and I am sitting across from my partner in crime, Kendall McDonald. And we have a very special episode today. We have a guest who I like to say is one of the most famous people at Fredonia Hill that nobody knows about. And that is my friend Todd Wright. And I will explain shortly why you know him, but you don't actually know him. Here we go. All right. Well, like I said before, we have a special guest with us. This is my friend Todd Wright. Say hello, Todd.
Well, I have 2 points of contention I want to start with.
All right. We're just going to go out of the gate here.
I'm a longtime listener of the podcast. I love it.
First time caller.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I try to listen to every episode. I have 2 things I want to say. My first, I'm just going to be transparent. My first rebuke is to you, Blake.
Rebuke. This is a Christian podcast.
Yes,
That's right.
Yeah, I
Rebuke
tried
is
to
the
come
word.
up with a churchy
Not
word.
constructive criticism. At the church, we say rebuke.
This podcast is too short. It's always too short.
I hear
Don't say
that.
it.
I want more.
No.
I love it.
I've heard that from people, but
Which
I've
is-
also heard people say that's enough.
They don't know what they're talking about.
But Blake, in its inception, Blake said, that's exactly what we want. We want people to say, I want more. And he's okay with that. So we've done exactly what
I
we
do
set
this
out to
just
do.
like I do with my worship sets, you know? Go a little on the shorter side,
Yeah,
keep
I
people
can
wanting
see that,
more.
yeah.
That's right. I do the opposite
just-
in my sermons. I go a little on the longer side and make them
I
tell me to
just know
stop.
Every time I'm listening, I'm like, what are they doing? Why are they ending? I'm just getting to know this person. What's going on? So that's for you.
I got a feeling this will be a longer one today.
Yeah, I started to say, like, let's go 3 hours. And then, Kendall, my rebuke for you.
Okay, I'm
and I
ready.
don't know you at all, really.
You've known him for about an hour.
Well, this is a good start then.
Yeah.
Let's start with rebuke.
Your disdain for non-coffee drinkers is palpable on this show. I'm a non-coffee drinker.
Oh, there it is.
And I hear it in your voice.
Oh, yeah.
There's a little sly, kind of snarky,
Yeah,
and
I feel it.
and I'm here to tell you to stop. And if coffee gets brought up on this one, I'm walking out of here.
All right.
Okay? That's all I want to say. Now go ahead and do your show.
Yeah.
However you want to do it.
So
Hi,
if,
everybody.
So if you were to drink coffee, would you drink it with
Well,
creamer?
now wait a minute. No. Hang on. So the last few episodes, I've kind of gotten on to folks that drink a coffee watered down milky. Is that what you're talking about? Or are you talking about the non-coffee drinkers? Period. Which
Well, I'm
because
glad
I have gotten a little snarky with people that are trying to drink coffee, but it's not quite black coffee, and I'll repent of that.
Yeah.
But
Well,
what are we talking about here?
So this is so great because you don't know who you're messing with here. Because early on, there was all of this shade thrown at Blake's wife
Yeah.
for putting too much creamer in her coffee. And while I don't remember the episode, later on in the episode,
Yeah.
you actually say, well, I don't like coffee to be too bitter. And so I feel like you kind of admitted there
Oh, that's true. Wow.
that you're a little sweet too.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so, no, my main contention is just the not dislike. That's probably not right. But yeah, for non-coffee drinkers in general.
In general. Okay.
Yeah. So
I'll soften up a little bit.
Thank you.
You know, that's a good example. This is a good example of church discipline.
Yeah.
And
It's what brothers do.
It's what brothers
Iron sharpens
do.
iron,
That's
guys.
right.
That's what I'm here to do.
We have
We
just set an
got
example.
real deep real fast.
That's right.
Everybody's like, what's happening?
So yeah, so now we're at
podcast,
this point, and we are, I don't know, we're like 4 minutes into the podcast.
I came in hot. I know I came in hot. I'm
And
sorry.
we have not actually introduced who you are. And
I was
so
going to say, and what's your name again?
we have all these people who are saying there's this Todd guy, and he's
Yeah.
like harping on the host of the podcast.
Yeah.
And so I was going to just introduce you first. So
Okay.
Todd is a songwriter.
Yes.
And he and I, we've written quite a few songs together that we sing here at Fredonia Hill on a regular basis. And, you know, this is like the old commercials where it would be like, all the hits, you know, like,
and they would list them. On
yeah.
the
So,
screen.
you know,
and then 4 songs.
Lord, I gotta provide. Yeah, praise God. All My Hope. That was a mega hit.
That's the hit?
Yeah,
Yeah,
the gold
for sure.
record.
Mega hit.
And then we have a new one that we've actually been listening to mixes this week. It should be out in the next
We've been in the
month.
lab cooking something up.
Yeah. It's called Come Find Rest. So be looking for that one. It's getting close.
Yeah, it sounds great.
Todd and I go way back. Apparently we were, I don't know, like 13, 14 years. Maybe longer than that.
Yeah,
I don't
probably
know.
so. Yeah.
It's so long that we were trying to isolate this at lunchtime. We don't know exactly when the first interaction
the overlap
happened. Yeah, so Todd, you know Todd's music, but you don't know Todd. So you've got a good introduction to him in the first few minutes. But like I said, Todd's a songwriter. So let's back up further. Where did you grow up? That's a good place to start.
So I'm from Lufkin. My parents still live there. My wife's parents still live there. So we're still around Lufkin a little bit. I live in Tyler. Moved to Tyler 13 years ago. The worship pastor at a church there called Bethel Bible Church. South Campus is where I am. So grew up in Lufkin, which means, you're around Nacogdoches. I would be here a lot for concerts. So probably folks who've lived here a long time will remember Jim Miller and Daystar, I believe was the name of the Christian music store.
Yeah.
So I was in Nacogdoches for concerts all the time. Even played a gig in this parking lot, this back parking lot.
Okay.
That was for some sort of youth week sort of thing.
Right.
And I remember it was going to be a bunch of bands that were going to play, and then it rained, and the guy who was running sound did not want to leave his soundboard out in the rain. And so that parking lot, there was a heated debate between the bands and this poor sound guy who was like, this is going to destroy my gear. So from Lufkin, love this part of the world. I love being back here. And Nacogdoches has gotten cool.
Changed. Yeah.
I mean, I haven't really spent time here in the last 13 years, but I like it.
You're from Lufkin. You know Nacogdoches is cooler anyway. I mean, that's just a given.
Well, I don't know. I think I'm predisposed to think the other, right?
That makes sense.
Right?
Yeah.
And
what do you notice is different?
So obviously the school is just taking over so much more of the
SFA is
property,
really
right? Like it's like encroaching on all stuff. But I don't know. I just think there's more seems like there's more local things here now, more restaurants and places to hang out, and it just seems like there's a lot more life here than when maybe I was here, 11, 12 years ago. Yeah. So I don't know if that's true, but it feels
I think
vibrant.
So. I remember when they built the Chili's across from the campus, and that was like the first chain restaurant we had in Nacogdoches, and that was a huge deal. That's a big deal.
Well, I was here a few weeks ago I don't know when this come out, but we were here for Labor Day. And my son and daughter found like this vintage T-shirt shop.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and that was just the coolest.
Right across from campus.
Yeah, yeah, and so it was just the coolest thing. And I know that's been a lot of different things, but it just felt very vibrant. Also, you guys have a celebrity who lives here, Herbert Midgley. I'm a fan of Herbert Midgley. So anytime I'm here.
I've not told you about him. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to see him out in the wild. I haven't yet, but every trip to Nacogdoches is a potential chance to see Herbert Midgley. So love Herbert. Anyway, so that's my backstory.
Okay, so you're from Lufkin. How did you get into leading worship? And I don't even know if I know this story, so I'm kind of interested in it myself.
So I turned 14 in 1990.
Okay.
So being a teenager in the 90s, in the explosion of contemporary Christian music, so CCM is what we called it back then, contemporary Christian music in the 90s was awesome. And I still miss the CCM of the 90s, but grew up in a musical house, grew up in a godly house, and so I loved music and really thought I was going to be a Stephen Curtis Chapman, like a kind of a singer-songwriter, do concerts, that sort of thing. And so really kind of pursued that, when I got to be 17 or 18, but was leading worship the whole time, right? So you're in youth group, you can play guitar, obviously, you're going to get asked to lead songs or whatever. So I was doing a lot, and concerts and those sort of things. But what ended up happening is that I'd go play these churches, and a lot of times you're playing these little Disciple Nows or youth rallies or whatever, and I would want to do like my concert stuff, my singer-songwriter stuff. But inevitably you play those things, and Blake, this, you almost always get asked, hey, can you lead a couple of worship songs?
Right.
And I could, because I did that. And So I would always lead worship, and I loved worship, but my mind was always set on this other thing, right? Kind of moving to Nashville and being a star. Yeah. And so met the woman who would eventually become my wife. She's a singer, so we were engaged, and we were playing all these events while I was leading worship at the same time in my home church. And eventually, after a particularly bad concert, that just didn't go well, she said, I don't know if you know this, but when you do the concert stuff, you're like a different guy. You're like super stressed. You're like sweating. You're not even talking. You don't even sound like yourself when you're introducing the songs. And she said, but when you lead worship, it's like you're totally at ease. And it's like the most natural thing in the world for you. And I was like, oh my goodness, she's right. And so, then I look back, well, I've been leading worship this whole time and I do really care about it. And so went through this little crisis of what am I going to do? And then I was thinking on the way here, what really sealed it for me was we got married. We decided that the church I went to, we were going to go there, my home church in Lufkin, Harmony Hill. And I was kind of just a man without a home. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Didn't know if I wanted to do the music thing. And I remember the worship leader there gave me a key to his office because he always had worship CDs in there. He's like, hey man, anytime you want to come in and listen to music, just do it, man. I get all kinds of stuff. And I remember being in his office when I should have been in church listening to the sermon, but he had the new Paul Balash CD. So I was like, dude, I got to hear it. Yeah. And so he comes in and he's like, well, hey, what are you going to do? I mean, now y'all are joining and you're like married and like, where do you want to serve here? And I was like, I think I want to serve in TV ministry. And man, his face just like fell. I mean, it was just like this, not disappointment, like just really kind of sadness. And he was like, oh, Todd, I wish you wouldn't do that. And I said, well, and I thought, well, I know this guy pretty well, but maybe not this well. And he said, man, you're a worship leader. You've always been a worship leader. And I'm paraphrasing here, but it was something like, you've got that spirit of David in you and on you. And man, it would break my heart to see you not do that. That's what you're born to do. It's like this really powerful moment. Yeah. And from that point on, I was like, yeah. And I look back in my life, like, of course God wanted me to be a worship leader. Like, that's what I did the whole time. And but when those two conversations between my wife and that guy, I thought, okay, I'm going to invest in this and I'm going to try to be good at it and do it well. And so it was pretty gradual. But once I kind of made that connection, man, to doing concerts and singer-songwriter, I just left that. That stuff just fell away so fast, and I started caring about leading worship and writing worship. And so that's kind of the next question is that, I mean, obviously you have a passion for leading worship, but you have a passion for songwriting, and songwriting specifically even for the church to an extent. You do all kinds of songs. I mean, you just released a kid's song not that long ago. Right. Yeah. But, you've written a lot of songs specifically to be used in corporate worship. How did you turn that corner? Because I know for me, it's like, we do a lot of cover songs. That's kind of what you do as you come up as a worship leader. But then there's a moment to where you really lock in and say, okay, what song does God have in my heart to use with the church? So how did you get to that point? Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I was already writing, so I think that was a natural outflow of like, well, I want to keep writing songs. And I do think in the beginning I had this sort of, and I think it's still true, but I felt it real strongly. Like I wanted to, in those early days, I wanted to write in the gaps. So one thing that a lot of people don't know about being a worship leader is, I mean, it feels like there's so many songs, but man, you start looking for a song to play at baptism, or you start looking for a song to play at communion, or any of these other kind of special moments. There aren't a ton of them out there. I mean, so you can find 10,000 songs about how God thinks I'm awesome, right? You can find all those all day. So initially it was about writing in the gaps. And so I would literally try to think in those days of what's something our church needs to sing that there aren't really songs for. And if I could find one that fit that, I would do it. So it wasn't like I'm going to be better than something Matt Redman would write or whatever. But if there was a gap, that's what I would write to. And so that's how I started. But then I sort of had to learn that the way you write a singer-songwriter thing and the way you write a corporate worship song are totally different. And in fact, I know this is probably more than you want to know, I have tried to write corporate worship songs for so long that I'm kind of unable to do the singer-songwriter thing because these other skills get honed. And when you try to do it the other way, you're like, well, this is kind of boring in that world. Right. It'd be perfect for worship, but it's kind of boring for radio music or whatever. So that's how I started. And then I just kept writing. And, I initially really wanted to do my own songs in church. I felt like that was something that was really important. As I've aged, I think I've probably mellowed on that a little bit. Now I'm maybe a little bit more patient. Like, okay, I'll wait till a good one comes and then I will try to do it. But yeah, just sort of trying to fit the needs and trying to write stuff that's singable.
Yeah.
It's another thing. We got so many worship songs that are just hard for a room full of people to sing.
For an average group of people.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's this great thing that Harold M. Best says, who wrote about worship, all these books about worship. It's the best analogy. And it works for songwriting. So he said, think of the praise team, think of you and your team as like woodworkers, like skilled woodworkers. And so you've practiced, you've rehearsed, you've got good gear. So imagine that you've got cedar and all this like rich wood, and you've got all these tools. You've got the best saws and the best hammers and all this stuff. And you get up there and you try to build this thing. You try to build a table on the stage every Sunday.
Right.
But all of these people out in the room have got like plywood and a crowbar. Like most of them don't have any of those things you have. They're not musicians. They don't really know how to sing or whatever the case is. And so he talked about constantly, okay, how do you take that and how do you try to build a simpler table? How do you try to say, okay, come build this table with me? Bring your crowbar, bring your plywood. You can help build this thing. And so that's always the struggle. And this as a songwriter. Yeah. Sometimes you write something and you love it and you go, this is too hard to sing. And so hopefully you have the maturity to go, okay, then we won't lead that one. Right. But I've led a lot of them before.
Yeah.
And you just learn the hard way, like, well, that was dumb of me to do.
Right.
So,
that just didn't work out.
Yeah, but I think as you age, you get better at that. You can kind of know. I mean, you know that.
Yeah. So I think it was probably 12 or 13 years ago, I was leading worship for a university ministry called Great Escape. And we had recorded a live album. Yeah, you're already shaking your head. We'd recorded this live album that was it was all covers. It was not any of our original music.
Kendall, I'm about to be rebuked here.
Yeah, I was waiting.
This is what's about to happen.
This was in my notes.
I'm ready.
I was waiting for this. And
you've just been sitting there like, okay, buddy, here it comes.
Here it comes. Yeah. So I was.
I'm interrupting. I did not know this until just you were on my podcast.
Yes, I talked about this on your podcast.
And I had no idea you even knew about any of that.
Yeah.
So go ahead and tell us.
Oh, come on. Let's tell the story.
So we had recorded an album of covers. It was a live album. And I had a fantastic band. I mean, I had some great musicians. It was, it was fantastic. And back in those days, Todd you were reviewing
a
lot
website,
of worship albums on a website. And
no way.
Yeah, and so he reviewed the Great Escape live album.
Oh yes. Do we have any quotes?
Wouldn't it be funny if he remembered the whole review by memory?
Let me pull it up right here.
Like it's written in his bedroom on the wall. Like
so.
Motivation.
And Todd made the comments of, man, the band was fantastic, production was good, but man, I really wish I would have heard some original music in that album. It's just an album of covers, and there was different arrangements of some hymns and some songs that people did. A lot of songs people did, and I remember taking that. Actually, I was in Fredericksburg, Texas, on vacation.
Wow!
The time when I read that review,
yeah,
and it was like a gut punch, but it was a good gut punch because prior to that, I had dabbled in some songwriting, mainly like singer-songwriter type stuff. Nothing really for worship, and I had a lot of insecurity in that of like, I just don't know if I'm a good enough songwriter to write worship music. But that challenged me in that moment of like, you know what? I do need to be writing songs for the people that I'm leading, and I shortly after that, I came back and started writing worship music. That was like a pivot point for me. So, I just wanted to say thanks for being a punk and reviewing my my album.
So, and I was thinking about this too on the way here. And I mean, Kendall, you know this, but I mean, you've just gotten so good. I don't even mean just at the writing thing. I mean, so just leadership, worship leadership, but also just pastoral leadership. You know what I mean? So like, there are a lot of guys who in college, like, I'll lead some songs, but very few guys stay in the game and like grow and mature. Right. And you have like, you're so good. And I say this all the time, best chorus writer out there. I think you write some of the best choruses, and I'm so glad that you didn't be like, who's Todd Wright? Who cares? I mean, I did say that at the beginning. Well, I know. But I mean, so.
Well, I appreciate that.
So I will say this: I was right, But I think I also was a little bit wrong because I can remember thinking, who is this punk kid think he is? And then you end up becoming like this amazing worship leader that I'm like, oh shoot, well I guess God knew what he was doing. I guess Todd was wrong.
Well, and I probably was a pretty punk kid at the
weren't we
time,
all?
you know. But yeah, there's those seasons where we walk through that.
We have pictures.
Yeah, there's pictures floating around.
But listen, when you released those older songs a few months back,
Yeah.
so that old stuff was good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like a lot of people are embarrassed because it's not that great, but I think you were kind of already good from the start.
That's why I re-released them. I was like, that's not bad for a 19-year-old.
Who is this kid? He's pretty good.
I mean, we really thought we were good at the time when we wrote them.
Yes, it goes the other way.
Yeah. But, you know, I remember going back a few years, flash forward, and I was here at Free on Your Hill. I had written a song called All the Earth, and I don't know if you and I had even really talked in a long time.
But that song was based on, you were in a dormant writing season.
Oh,
you
yeah.
had not written, and then it was like, that song was asked of you, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was
you all of a sudden kind of had a kick in the gear.
There was a staff
start.
member that came in my office and was like, I'm preaching a sermon on this passage on Sunday. Can you write a song for it? And
Super
it was
fun,
it was like
easy.
a Tuesday, you know.
Yeah,
and I was
right.
like, oh, you know. But you just happened to reach out to me and say, man, that's a fantastic song. Yeah. We need to write together sometime.
Yeah.
And
that's how it started.
Yeah, that's kind of how. I mean, we knew each other for a long time,
Yeah.
but I think at that point was really when we kind of started having a writing relationship. And
Yeah, so I think when you write songs, I mean, you know this probably from just, you know, people in your team or just as you meet other writers. So there is kind of I mean, it's a dumb way to say it, but there's kind of like a real recognize real sort of thing. Like sometimes you hear a song and you go, oh, that he's got the chops. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't. Sometimes you go, okay, that's a fine song. But then other times you go, okay, this person's really got something to say. And I listened back to that the other day, and I love that song. It still holds up.
yeah.
You know, it doesn't sound dated or anything old. I love it.
Yeah, that song really was. It was for me as a writer of worship music. That really was a turning point. And that song, there was a couple of iterations of that song. I mean, there was a version of it that had an extra verse, and there was a version of it that had a bridge and didn't have a bridge. And so it took a little while to get to that point. And that was like a couple years span from when I first wrote it to kind of the final.
Yeah, that's
product.
another thing that you have, which Kendall, you may know this or not, but so like one thing I know. People don't listen to hear other people brag on y'all, but I'll brag on you.
Right,
so you also have you're really patient with songs. I think a lot of songwriters, worship songwriters especially, are really bad at. Like I wrote this Thursday night, boom, we're doing it Sunday morning. And you seem to have this pretty good sensibility of like, let's wait, let's see if it's, needs to,
Oh my goodness.
How many times have you tweaked, adding a verse or like,
yeah.
I mean, there've been times we've written, I thought we were done, and you'll be like, hey, I don't think it's done. And so that, but I think in the long run, that really makes a difference.
Yeah.
I mean, it's sort of it's the equivalent of writing a sermon Saturday night at 11:45 p.m. or working on it all week.
Right.
Like, it's like, you're going to tell a difference if you take the time on it. So I'm envious of that because sometimes I'm like, done, let's do it. Let's record it. Let's lead it. So.
Release it. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. So you kind of referenced this a minute ago, that you have a podcast, and I don't want to bog down because I'd rather people go listen to your podcast.
Yeah.
But it's specifically for worship leaders, but it's entertaining and enjoyable, and it kind of gives you an insight of kind of some of the stuff we just talked about. But you spend a lot of time making your experience and knowledge in worship leader a resource for other guys. And how did you get into that of like, okay, I'm going to share what I've learned with other people.
Well, so it's really born out of being a young worship leader and going to every worship conference I could. Like if there was a thing in Houston or Dallas, man, I would go because I just, and some of that's a little bit of celebrity worship, right? Like they're going to have the famous worship leader there. And I would leave those disappointed every single time. Now, I might have heard good music or heard good teaching, but I would either leave going, well, that was great, but I don't have that soundboard. I don't have those musicians.
Right.
I don't have the money. They would always have a songwriting class. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I'll tell you this story. So what they would do is when you go to these things, they have a songwriting class and it's always a name you recognize. And they'll put in there like what they've written. because they want you to know, okay, this guy's like written a hit or whatever. So there was a year I went to one, and they had this guy who I knew, who was this famous vineyard worship leader, and he'd written all these songs. His name was Wes Tuttle. And at the time he was working for a record label in Nashville, and I thought, oh my goodness, Wes Tuttle. So I go to the class, and Wes Tuttle is like expounding all of these sort of rules about songwriting. And he really harped on the mechanics of songwriting, which is always helpful for me. But like, okay, you don't ever want to change tenses. That was the rule, right? So you don't sing about God and then to God in the chorus. And the first thing that pops into my mind is the song "Come Now's the Time to Worship," which changes tenses. Yeah. And so I wait around to ask Wes Tuttle about this. And so I say, hey, you said that, but what about "Come Now's the Time to Worship"? And he goes, well, that's a little different. He's like, because that kind of happened before there were really record labels and rules about things. I was like, okay. He goes, but the other thing is it just got famous, so it doesn't matter. It's famous, so it doesn't matter. Now, he wasn't being flippant, but he was just like, you're going to go tell people they can't do it? It's like the most popular song in the world, the past 2 years. And so what I realized was, oh my goodness, there's another level to leading worship that's not the famous stuff. Like how can I encourage worship leaders in a way that's free and that's easily accessed and that is focused on the practical, not trying to be a cover band, not being all about gear. I mean, this is a thing I'm noticing because I have this new website, howtoleadworship.com, and I'm trying to even put more resources into it. But here's the thing. If you go look for resources on worship leading, you can find stuff on how to play this riff, how to hook up a Haze machine, how to run Planning Center. Yeah. You find very few things on what do you say in between songs. Like some of the most important stuff about worship leading you can't find. And so the podcast was birthed out of that. I did 3 episodes about songwriting for corporate worship. I put them on SoundCloud just to share them with friends. And I had some friends who said, man, you really ought to make those available through a podcast app, be easier. Right. And so then it was just kind of off and running. Once I did it, I was like, oh, I really like this.
So your podcast is called?
The Average Everyday Worship Leader.
Which I think is a great name.
Yeah.
It's very descriptive.
It is. And, it's funny. I've had people say, they've messaged me, be like, hey, I really like your podcast, but I mean, am I average?
Oh yeah,
am I an average? And I knew this guy, and I was like, no, dude, you're way above average, right? You're awesome. But the point is, it's okay to be average, right? I mean, it's like that's fine. It's not a bad thing.
I mean, that's going to be the most relatable to the people that you're leading, which I think is important. Yeah. I've always said that God's made me a mediocre vocalist so I could be a effective worship leader.
Exactly.
If I were on American Idol and that that's the way that I sang all the time, then that wouldn't be as effective. And
it's so true.
Yeah. I think
so I love the podcast. We've been doing it for 4 years now, maybe. I can't remember. But I love it. I took a break for this summer. That was really nice. But now I'm back and kind of fired up about it again. So
yeah, and I'm on the podcast. So it would have released. What day is those released on?
Friday. So Friday the 1st, October 1st.
Right. So this podcast will come out on Tuesday. So it'll already be available. So if you want to go hear me and Todd,
and we talk about all kinds of stuff.
It was a really unique format that time. We just kind of talked for half an hour.
Yeah, it's just a convo.
Yeah,
just recorded a convo.
Yeah. So that's the podcast. Do you have any burning questions over there? I feel like you're ready to go.
Oh, Kendall's here. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, hey guys.
Hey man.
Yeah, we got into we got like worship leading nerd thing going on over here.
I mean, I have so many questions. I think it's fascinating to listen to two guys really take a deep dive in their craft. One of the things I don't know if you can answer this quickly or not, but I've got an idea for maybe a fun little segment we'll do here in a second. But I'm curious, as you talk about songwriting and particularly leading worship in most people's normal context, how do you feel like the rise in popularity of the worship genre over the last, I mean, you're talking about when you were starting to write, there was somewhat of a vacuum, worship music, producing it, recording it, record label, that wasn't a big deal. And so, you were talking about writing in the gap. I love that phrase. It seemed like maybe 20, 25 years ago, writing in the gap, there was a larger gap.
Yeah.
And now worship is, a massive genre. But how has that put pressure on and influence the way that guys in an average everyday kind of context do what they do and feel like they can even write and do their own thing.
I know Todd has a lot of thoughts on
I knew
this.
that this would be big.
Yeah.
Is it possible to answer quickly?
You give a preview and then they can go listen to your podcast.
Yeah,
You
so I
can
talk
really
about this
get
a
it
lot.
there.
So what I call this is the cover band conundrum, okay? That's what I call it. So this is the example I'll give. So the worship songwriting is risky because there's no safety net. So, for example, a few weeks ago, I started doing at our church this really big kind of popular worship song, just like a hit song. And I'm usually kind of slow on that, and I don't do a bunch of real hit popular stuff. And so we added it. So it's on the radio. It's got millions of views on YouTube.
Yeah.
It's one of those that young people like and old people like and all that sort of stuff. So the second I do that, because worship music is now an industry, it's a genre like you're saying. The second I do that song, or any worship leader does a song, there's going to be a response. It's hard to know what that response is, because sometimes that response is, man, that was so powerful. That just really reminded me of who God is. And I was just worshiping and I was singing. Yeah. There's also the other response is like, yo, y'all kill that. Me and my family, I love that song, dude. It's in my phone, bro. And so it's hard to know, like, well, did they, now, if they like it, that's great, but it's hard to know, well, were they really worshiping, or was I just a cover band for those 4.5 minutes? So that is the hard part about writing a song, because once you write something that they've never heard before, and you say, hey, we're going to sing this song, if you're not careful about how you teach the song or how you talk about the song, there's no way to know. I mean, and this is good and bad. It's a pure experience. Like, okay, if they like it, I'm going to know. But man, if they hate it, I'm going to know that for sure as well. Now, I think it's worth the risk. So when I do a new song, I try to be very careful about how we teach it and how we play it and all those sort of things. But I will say that when a song connects the first time or fifth time, however long it takes, it is absolutely worth all that work and all those nerves, because you do have this sense of like, okay, I served these people. I did something that's a blessing to these people. And I think most people think, well, that could make you arrogant or could build up your ego. I think it's the exact opposite. I think it's completely humbling. Like, God, that you would use this little thing that, that I wrote in my study at home. Right. Now, man, these people are holding on to it and it's blessing them. So I think it's worth it, but it is harder, because it's way easier just to play 4 hits and go, well, they're going to like it. Why would I take a chance on, trying to do something that they've never heard before? So, and I think it's why a lot of worship leaders don't write. But I'll end with this. I think this is maybe my most controversial opinion. I think every worship leader should try to write songs. I think they should be writing songs, whether they lead them or they don't. You should be trying to constantly, how do I put into words what our congregation's going through, even if you never play it. So that could be journaling. It could be a lot of things. It doesn't have to be a song, but worship leaders who don't write, I'm always like, man, you need to be writing something in some way. So I don't know. Is that?
No, I think that's good. I think that's good. And I think the more that worship becomes a popular genre and the less incentive there is to write. Yeah. Because I can just stand up and cover and get a response, check the box, keep my job. Yes. People are happy, but it stays so surface level, and you never really get into the deeper parts of pastoring from that platform, which is so important. And so,
but we're also seeing, in a college town would be really, really hip to this too. This is why it's so interesting. So I think worship music about every 2 or 3 years tries to reset itself. So like right now, the reset is Maverick City music. So if you go listen to Maverick City music, it sounds nothing like Hillsong or Elevation or Bethel. It's mixed different. It's recorded different. It's a little rougher.
Raw sounding.
It's raw. A few years ago, it was United Pursuit and this guy named Will Reagan. Yeah. Like worship music continually tries to reset back to the old days of just some guitars and a piano. And so I think if you're a writer, if you're smart, you can kind of ride that. You can kind of look at where music's going and go, okay, folks are into piano-led things now. Let me write something on piano. I mean, you can do that. I don't think it'll ever completely be reformed, but this is another thing. And I know you're getting all my soapbox moments here, but worship leaders just need to be thinking about this stuff. They need to be listening to music. They need to be thinking about the culture. They need to be reading about corporate singing. I mean, this should be what you care about. And you have to become kind of an expert on this little subculture of Christianity, which is the songs we sing.
Yeah.
Okay, your segment. You have a segment.
We were talking before about where you said you've thought on your podcast things were going to be funny, and then you were
Okay.
the only one that
Yeah.
thought they
So
were
it
funny.
may not be that. Is that what you're saying?
So this is one of those where
Okay.
it's probably not going to be funny. But it's a pastor and two worship pastors
Sure.
sitting here. So I just have to try this. And the segment's going to be called this is what he said, but what's he really thinking?
Okay.
And what I want you to do is I'm going to take you through some classic worship pastor interactions and some things that I've heard Blake say to me.
Oh.
But I want to know
man, yeah.
what's he really thinking.
This is gonna be fun.
So this will be fun.
Todd and I, this will be. I'm interested in this because
Yeah.
he and I
See
think
how
a lot.
insightful
Yeah.
I am?
I've got a few in my mind, and then if you guys want to throw one in
Okay,
here, that'll
great.
be good. Okay, so the pastor comes into your office and has heard a song or has got something that he wants you to play, and he gives you this, eloquent reason why we need to have this as part of our worship, and says, I just really, where do you want to? Let's fit this in. Let's get this song. And Blake always, this is what I hear. This is what I always hear is, oh yeah, okay, that sounds great. Let me dig into that a little bit. What's he really thinking?
Most of the time, he's probably hoping you'll forget about it. That would be my guess. That's what I would be.
Just get him out of my
You're
office.
like, okay, yeah, okay. Try to distract you, or something.
That's interesting because I don't know if you caught it last night. So I was in here with Mama Bears last night, and they were working on a song that they were going to lead for the university worship, and it was a song that you asked about.
There's one
Like
I've been
that you
asking
said
for.
no?
I didn't say no,
Yes,
but I
he-
was like,
no
I'll
is in the
effectively.
actions, right?
I said what he said.
Yeah.
And I was like, is he going to poke his head in and be like, are we doing it? Because it was actually for the university worship service. But,
I also love that he's
So that's-
explaining his position. He's like, he gives you this eloquent reason.
Yeah. That's exactly because I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Okay,
What
I
is
can't
the
just come
song?
in here. I can't just come in here and give him
Yes.
just, hey, here's a song. Like I
Yes.
want him to think that I've thought
Yeah.
about it, and because I have, and it's anyway. I don't.
But I would say this. So not to get away from the funny thing, I do think, and so worship leaders are so bad about this. I do think if you walked in and said it, like you are his pastor. So if my pastor comes in and is like, I want to do this song, then by golly, we're doing the song. Like now I might be able to go, I don't know. I mean, have a conversation.
Right.
But like as a worship leader, he's still submissive to you. So I'm just giving you permission. Like
Wow.
you can
I like
say.
See, but I don't ever. I don't. I need to
Well,
use.
it may not be
I need
y'all's
to use a
dynamic.
stronger car.
he's
I
also come in and
float
said,
out
like,
there
let's do a
as
Switchfoot song. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know if that's
Oh,
going to
yeah,
work.
yeah, yeah.
not as worship as
Yeah.
an example. Anyway,
But,
okay.
yeah.
What was the
All
song?
right,
Do you
so,
remember?
that I
You
asked him
will.
to play most recently?
Yeah.
What was it?
Christ be magnified.
Christ be magnified.
Okay.
I have nothing against the song. It just
We
has
don't have to. We don't. It's
Yeah.
okay. We don't have to.
I have weird feelings about that song too.
the verses mess me up.
Yeah.
I'll just go ahead and tell you that.
Yeah, I'm
It's
kind
kinda
of
weird.
weird on that one too.
But I don't know.
Okay.
We don't
keep
have-
going.
we don't
I don't
have to
want to
hash that
justify the
song
song,
out. Yeah,
but
yeah.
now I'm going to be. Now people are going to look it up and be like, "Oh, why did Ken want us to play that song?" Okay.
Or they're mad at Blake. I love that song.
Yeah,
too.
that's right.
It's still a great song.
Okay. I had a. Okay. We're doing this series right now that just to be honest with you, is kicking my rear end in terms of time.
Yeah.
We're going through the whole Bible in 10 weeks, and I'm not doing well.
That's stupid.
In time. Yeah, it's really hard. Anyway, but we've and coming out of COVID, we really shortened our messages just because people being
Yeah.
able to watch. Anyway,
Yeah.
so we're kind of in this weird time, and I'm trying to dial in message length again, and I'm struggling. And so the messages are going long, and Blake will every week I'll kind of say, okay, what was it? Because he has the recording, and where were we at in terms of time, and he'll always say something nice like, well, it was 47 minutes this time, and our target's like, I won't tell people what the target is. I don't want them to know that.
Cat out of the bag.
And he'll say, oh, it was 47 this time, but it was really good. It was a really
I
good.
just say, well, you spent a little more time in the introduction this time.
Yeah, and he'll say like, yeah, we, this is what you said was really good, and we really need to take the time. So, what's he really thinking?
Probably feeling frustrated. Like, how can I help this guy get the sermon time down? And not knowing how. Not knowing how.
Yeah, not really my cup of tea.
Listen, I work in a Bible church, so a 45-minute sermon, that's norm. Like that's the normal.
Well,
thing.
that's how he comforted me this week.
We did.
Because he came into my office and he was like, "Let's just do a quick Google scan on just some, other message links." And we did. And he was like, "Look, these guys are all for you." He's like really comforting me, and it was.
But
awesome.
listen, but you know the thing. I mean, there are sometimes my senior pastor preaches 45 minutes, and it's like 45 minutes of awesome.
Yeah.
And then there are other times where, man, you have to get real in the weeds on like the Greek or historical context, and it's like the longest 45 minutes ever
of your life.
It's like two totally different experiences.
And I think that we're still in the 45 minutes of awesome. On,
I know
on
you
don't
do.
have to-
You've said that to me many times.
Okay,
Yeah, we talk about it every week.
We don't have to go. That's just funny. So those are two. I had a couple of others, but what would you say? Are there anything I'm missing? These classic worship pastor interactions that I need to know. What's he really thinking?
That's a good question.
Okay. All right. One more. Sorry. One more.
No, hit it.
Okay. This.
I like how these are all hypothetical.
No, these are not. I never said that.
These have all happened in the last
I was
week.
thinking like, oh, this is cool. He's created some scenarios in his mind.
I haven't. Feedback on sound volume and now this happens, and I so feel for you guys in this. This happens. People are chirping about that all the time.
Yeah.
So you get that from everywhere. When it comes from pastor, and they go, "Oh, this was a little loud. I don't know what it was." And for me, not being a music guy at all, it's hard for me to describe even what I'm hearing. So I'm trying to. So as I come into his office and I'm describing things I'm sure he already knows really well that have happened, and it's I'm saying this was either too loud or this was too bass or this was too whatever. What's he really thinking?
Probably he's thinking, I know that, and I can't get the sound guy or whoever to do it different. Like he probably knows, yes, there's a weird bass frequency. And I've asked the sound guy 50 times to change it, and he won't.
Shout out to
or whatever the situation is.
Not our sound guys, but
never happens here.
So probably you're not telling him anything he doesn't already know.
That's right.
But maybe feels a little powerless of like, okay, I'll try again.
I always feel so bad for him if there's something that happens in the room while he's playing.
Yes.
Nothing I can do.
He's stuck. I always feel so bad for him. I'm always thinking, oh, poor guy. Like I know he knows, and now he's got to try to focus, and so hard.
I know.
Anyway,
I will say Kendall is helpful in those moments sometimes to make
you
sure.
see me like sprint to the back of the room.
There are times, I've seen Kendall like look around, like, wait a second, and then he'll go and solve the problem for me. And so that's always nice.
Scary.
I was gonna say that's super scary. If you know how little I know.
I'll just tell everyone listening, anytime you see a pastor running on Sunday morning,
that's why I hate doing it.
Nothing's great.
That's why I hate doing it. I'm always frozen. The last time this happened, I'm frozen in the front of the room, knowing that if I move,
somebody will know something's up.
Everybody's going to go, what's going on? And they're going to follow where I go. And looking around, trying to make eye contact with other people that could move, and they're not moving.
Where's the other pastors?
Yeah, that's right. And nobody was finally I moved.
Codes,
yeah, that's right.
I wiggle my hand and you go.
No, I think that's because I think we're laughing and joking, but I think it's one of the most rewarding relationships within the church.
Yeah.
And what God uniquely does in you individually, but then brings together for the edification of the body is a really neat experience to have over and over again. And it's cool internally developing that relationship. And it comes with some of those moments where you got to speak each other's language, and that's hard. But anyway,
well, I'll just say that you published some articles years ago called the Sunday Team, and it talked about the relationship between the pastor and the worship pastor and how important that was. And that really caught my eye, and thought, man, that's something that needs to be developed, and it doesn't get developed often.
It's so weird because you're both serving in the same place at the same time, but everything about it is different for each of you. Like there's not really much that's similar in leading worship and preaching, and yet there you are side by side doing it. It's like a really weird dynamic, and it's why I think a lot of worship leaders don't stay at a place. I mean, staying somewhere 10 years or 13 years like me, that's rare. I mean, you talk to worship leaders who've been somewhere 20 years, you're like, man, you are a unicorn. Like nobody does that. And so that's always, to me, like when I'm thinking about my friends, if I ever see a church where the pastor and worship leader have both been there a long time, I'm like, dude, that relationship is solid. Because it's not easy. No. And there's difficult things, but
I mean, we obviously just highlighted those in the most uncomfortable
Yes.
segment that we've ever done here. For me.
Whatever. It was fun. I enjoyed it.
So Kendall's going to start calling me.
Yeah.
Like, I just was in Blake's office and he
I
asked
need
me
to know,
really
what is he
weird.
thinking?
It's like your friend, do you think she likes me? I mean, what's the
That's
deal?
exactly right.
Well, we have extended this podcast
For you,
for
Todd.
you only.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so we've gone like 10 minutes or so.
Wow.
You know.
14.
You guys okay?
14 minutes
Yeah,
over.
yeah. So
Sorry to our listeners.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think
There's nobody listening anymore.
yeah, they turned it off about 20 minutes ago. But then
Aren't you guys going to feel stupid if they're like, man, that podcast, I loved it. It was great. Won't you feel dumb?
yeah, we'll be.
That's a good segue. You can
Yeah.
write us at
stc@fredoniahill.org, and you can all your complaints. Actually, I should just give Todd's
Yeah, do it.
email in there,
Yeah.
and that way you can give all your complaints to him.
I've got a special email folder for him.
Yeah. But Todd, thank you so much
Yeah,
for
man.
jumping in, coming down, driving down from Tyler.
That's right.
We got him some good Brendan's barbecue today,
great. Thank
and got him in a good mood so he could rebuke us. And
That's
so
right.
When's the next song come out? Do you know yet?
the next song, when we talked about "Come Find Rest," is one me and Todd wrote, will come out probably in the next month. I don't have a set date, but it's coming.
Yeah.
So excited about that.
Can I give one plug?
You can give all the plugs.
So there is and I don't know when it'll be out yet. There's an album coming out from a guy named Lee Black. He's
Okay.
a friend of mine, songwriter. It's a hymns record. And there's a song on it called "Oh Blessed Tree."
It's a good song.
Record might even be out by the time this drops. I don't know yet. But if you're interested in hearing something I've written
Yeah.
that's not with Blake,
Yeah.
check that out.
I
there
mean,
are
I wish
other-
it was. That's a
Yeah.
great song.
There are other versions of the song, but Lee's version is really cool.
Yeah.
Has a full string section and just really sweet version.
Which,
of
by
it,
the
so-
way, I mentioned it. Todd has written about 6,000 songs, I think, and most of them are on Apple Music and Spotify. So if
Yeah.
you look up Todd Wright Band,
that's right.
you'll find a good chunk of them there. There's also, you're starting this Songs for Singing thing
Yep, Songs for Singing
where
is
you
him.
do some hymn stuff.
Yeah.
And so make sure you check those out. Those are fantastic resources and some good songs to add to your worship.
Are you going to tell
playlist.
them what you tried to do with my Songs for Singing?
Oh yeah,
You wanna tell 'em?
I got all the tracks from Todd and then tried to remix it the way that I would have done the song, and that add a bunch of.
Was that kind of like your shots fired
No,
back for
it
his
was just-
critique of Great Escape?
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's been waiting.
He made-
13 years.
He made all the tracks available, and I thought, you know what, this needs some dobro and some mandolin and some stuff to make it.
He also auto-tuned my vocals.
Yeah,
to
I
like
did.
100%,
Yeah, I did.
So I sound like
Yeah.
T-Pain on
Yeah,
that.
it was- yeah,
Which
it
might
was-
be a new thing, like the folk instruments with with the auto-tune.
Yeah, you know, I just figured out how to use auto tune,
We're
and
gonna
so I
follow
was
the
No,
I was
you're going crazy.
I was putting on everything. So anyway, all right. Well, thank
Thanks.
you guys for listening. Thank you, Todd, for coming down. And man, I'm so excited about what's coming next. And just you've got some cool stuff. If you're interested in all in what we talked about, make sure you check out his podcast. But that's a wrap, I think.
Adios.
Adios.